Thank you for joining with me. We are in A Course in Miracles, complete and annotated edition, Chapter 2, Right Defense and Release from Fear. And today we are on day 45, section 11, the basic conflict, and we are reading paragraphs 10 through 22. If you will please join me for a prayer. Dear God, please enable me to set aside everything I think I know about this book, about you, God, about myself and about others, and about everything else in this world, God. Please allow me to have an open mind and a new experience with this book, with you, with myself, with others, and with all in this world, God. God, I thank you for your vision today. Amen. So here we go. Chapter 2, section 11, paragraphs 10 through 22. And we are in the basic conflict. The fundamental opponents in the real basic conflict are creation and miscreation. All fear is implicit in the second, just as all love is inherent in the first. Because of this difference, the basic conflict is one between love and fear. So much, then, for the true nature of the major opponents in the basic conflict. Since all such theories lead to a form of therapy in which redistribution of psychic energy results, it is necessary to consider our concept of psychic energy next. And I'm going to go read footnote 140. In Freudian thought, psychic energy, also called libido, is the primal energy that powers the psyche. This energy takes the form of various drives that naturally move toward satisfaction and release. In this respect, Freud was more accurate than his followers, who were essentially more wishful. Energy can emanate from both creation and miscreation, and the particular ratio between them which prevails at a given point in time does determine the behavior at that time. If miscreation did not engender energy in its own right, it would be unable to produce destructive behavior, which it very patiently does. Patently does, which it very patently does. I think that, okay. Everything that you make has energy because, like the creation of God, it comes from energy and is endowed by its maker with the power to make. Miscreation is still a genuine creative act in terms of the underlying impulse, but not in terms of the content of what is made. This does not deprive what is made of its own creative power. It does, however, guarantee that the power will be misused or used fearfully. To deny this is merely the previously mentioned fallacy of depreciation. 141. See text chapter 2, section 10, 5 through 6. The fallacy of depreciation is the idea that the destructive thoughts do not matter as long as you do not act them out. Although Freud made a number of fallacies of his own, he did avoid this one in connection with psychic energy. The later theorists denied the split energy concept by not attempting to heal it, but by reinterpreting it instead of redistributing it. 142. Pronoun clarification. Not by attempting to heal it, the split, but by reinterpreting it, the split, instead of redistributing it, the energy. This placed them in the illogical position of assuming that the split which their therapies were intended to heal had not occurred. The result of this approach is essentially a form of hypnosis. 143. The implication seems to be that patients are essentially hypnotized into believing that the basic conflict in them does not exist, though it clearly does. This is quite different from Freud's approach, which merely ended in a deadlock, 144, i.e., a deadlock between the two opponents later identified as the id and the superego. Freud believed that the best that can be achieved in a human being is a well-adjusted neurotic. A similar deadlock occurs when both the power of creation and of miscreation coexist. This is experienced as conflict only because the individual feels as if both were occurring at the same level. He believes in what he has miscreated in his own unconscious, and he naturally believes it is real because he has made it. He thus places himself in a position where the fearful becomes real. Nothing but level confusion can result as long as this belief is held in any form. Inappropriate denial and equally inappropriate identification of the real factors in the basic conflict will not solve the problem itself. The conflict cannot disappear until it is fully recognized that miscreation is not real, and therefore there is no conflict. This entails a full realization of the basic fact that although you have miscreated in a very genuine sense, you need neither continue to do so nor to suffer from your past errors in this respect. A redistribution of psychic energy, then, is not the solution. Both the idea that both kinds must exist and the belief that one kind is amendable for use or misuse are real distortions. The only way out is to stop miscreating now and accept the atonement for miscreations of the past. Only this can reestablish true single-mindedness, footnote 145, i.e. psychic unity. The structure of the psyche follows along the lines of the particular libido concept the theorist employs, 146. Libido is the psychic energy seen by Freud as primarily sexual, but by other theorists as instinctual energy in general, that when misdirected or suppressed results in mental illness. Freud's psyche was essentially a good and evil picture, with a very heavy weight given to the evil. This is because every time I mentioned the atonement to him, which was quite often, he responded by defending his theory more and more against it. This resulted, I went a little too far. This resulted in his increasingly strong attempts to make the illogical sound more and more logical. I was very sorry about this because his was a singularly good mind, and it was a shame to waste it. However, the major purpose of his incarnation was not neglected. He did succeed in forcing recognition of the unconscious into humanity's calculations about itself, a step in the right direction which should not be minimized. Freud was one of the most religious men I have known recently. Unfortunately, he was so afraid of religion that the only way he could deal with it was to regard it, not himself, as sick. 147. In The Future of an Illusion, 1927, Freud put forth the view that religion is an illusion, a product of wish fulfillment which arose to give divine authority to societal controls on the destructive passions of the individual, and to give us a comforting illusion of control over the uncontrollable forces of nature. This naturally prevented healing. Freud's superego is a particularly interesting example of the real power of miscreation. It is noteworthy through throughout the whole development of his theories that the superego never allied itself with freedom. The most it could do in this direction was to work out a painful truce in which both opponents lost. 148, i.e. the superego and the id. The superego reaches a truth with the id through mediation of the ego. The perception could not fail to force him to emphasize discontent in his view of civilization. 149. In Civilization and Its Discontents, 1930, Freud focused on the inherent friction between the individual's desire to freely express the instincts for sex and aggression, the id, and civilization's need for the individual to repress those same instincts and conform to the group, represented by the superego. This friction, which gives rise to perpetual discontent, is the same deadlock Jesus is referring to above. I think my brain stops working, in which both opponents lost. The Freudian id is really only the more superficial level of the unconscious and not the deepest level at all. 150. In Freudian theory, the id is the unconscious source of primitive, instinctive impulses. In the Course, the deepest level of the unconscious is the miracle level. This, too, was inevitable because Freud could not divorce miracles from magic. It was therefore his constant endeavor, even preoccupation, to keep on thrusting more and more material between consciousness and the real deeper level of the unconscious, so that the latter became increasingly obscured. The result was a kind of bedlam in which there was no order, no control, and no sense. This was exactly how he felt about it. The later theoretical switch to the primacy of anxiety was an interesting device intended to deny both the instinctive nature of the destructiveness and the force of the power of miscreation. 151. Freud's 1926 work, Inhibition, Symptoms, and Anxiety, represented one of the most significant changes of mind on fundamental issues. It set forth his new theory of anxiety, in which he argued that anxiety causes repression and not vice versa. By placing the emphasis on the result, the generative nature of the power was minimized. 152. In other words, anxiety is actually the result of the power of miscreation. By emphasizing only this result, Freud inappropriately de-emphasized the power that generates that result. Destructive behavior is instinctual. The instinct for creation is not obliterated in miscreation. That is why it is always invested with reality. One of the chief ways in which you can correct your own magic miracle confusion is to remember that you did not create yourself. 153. The reference to your own magic miracle confusion implies that we, like Freud, have confused miracles with magic. That Freud could not divorce miracles from magic possibly means that he saw miracles as attempts to control the external world through magical means such as prayer and ritual. Our own confusion of miracles and magic probably refers to seeing miracles as psychic feats. Without conviction, they, miracles, deteriorate into magic, performed by our own separate will rather than by God's will through us. We solve this by remembering that we did not create ourselves, This restores God's role as our cause so that His will once again works through us. You are apt to forget this when you become egocentric, and this places you in a position where belief in magic is virtually inevitable. Your instincts for creation were given you by your own Creator, who is expressing the same instinct in His creation. Since the creative ability rests solely in the mind, everything which you make or create is necessarily instinctive. It also follows that whatever you produce is real in your eyes, but not necessarily in the sight of God. And now we will read the notes of Emily Bennington and Robert Perry. The Basic Conflict, Chapter 2, Section 11, paragraphs 10 through 22. We are on day 45. Here we learn that the title of this section, The Basic Conflict, boils down to the conflict between creation and miscreation, which essentially means between love and fear. The idea is that these two forces, one destructive and one miracle working, are both present in our minds and are contending against each other, splitting our minds into two opposing camps. Miscreation is a genuine creative act in terms of the underlying impulse, but not in terms of the content of what is made. What this means is that there is creative power, at least in this world terms, of our miscreation, but its nature or content doesn't reflect true creativity, which is loving. Reflections. As you examine your relationships, would you say that they are defined more by love or fear? Note that this includes not just your own feelings of fear, but any actions you take that induce fear in others. If you find that you are acting lovelessly toward yourself and or certain people, what is this costing you in terms of your own peace and miracle-working ability? What is required to remove this form of content in your life? Key passages. The only way out is to stop miscreating now and accept the atonement for miscreations of the past. Only this can reestablish true single-mindedness. The instinct for creation is not obliterated in miscreation. And I think that is where we stop. I hope you enjoyed reading with me or listening in. Yes, tomorrow we will be on day 46. Thank you for joining with me in the conclusion of the Basic Conflict, Section 11.